Thanks, David. Nice to meet everybody. Good afternoon. Today, I'm really excited to dive into what really happens after the ink dries. Everyone talks about leading up to the LOI and then getting through the due diligence, but nobody really talks about the integration. So I like to think of the first 100 days as really the make or break sprint that's going to determine whether you're going to be popping champagne in 6 months or putting out fires. So let's go ahead and get started. I am Ashley Roden, as David introduced me. I have successfully integrated 4 post M&A integrations. And for me, everything really boils down to 3 truths: that people are the deal. If you can keep the talent, you can keep the value. If you plan early, really integration starts in due diligence, not once you close a deal, and that you should execute deliberately. So you should move in really clear phases, they should be measurable, and you should make adjustments along the way. Here is our roadmap that we are going to be discussing today. So we'll talk about the strategic foundation that you need to set. We'll walk through the operational execution, what that looks like, how you manage change and risk. Obviously, with an integration, there's going to be a lot of change, and with change comes a lot of risk. We will cover tools that are going to set you up for repeatability, making sure that you can then use this process over and over again as you acquire more and more firms. And then we're going to wrap up with key metrics and a checklist and a little Q&A. So let's first start with the obvious. This still trips people up left and right, but people drive 100% of your client relationships. And also, likely, if you do not have all your processes documented correctly, your institutional knowledge. When you lose them, you're going to lose the revenue, you lose your margins, and you really lose your culture overnight. So a lot of staff leave post-deal because of uncertainty. Maybe they don't like the culture clash that's going on, or they fear losing autonomy within their roles. And so your counter moves post-acquisition are to really map your key roles, evaluate your risks while you're in due diligence, and then you can always offer, stay bonuses tied to a 6 or 12-month milestone, if that's the direction that you choose. And last but not least, I say that communication is everything. So you should communicate early, often, and in multiple channels. I have coined what I like to call the ideal business profile. So just as you have an ideal client profile for your firm and the clients that you want to service, the IBP for acquisitions goes beyond just financial metrics. A lot of firms are interested in the financials. You don't want to do a deal if it doesn't make sense from a financial aspect. So a lot of due diligence is focused specifically on financial metrics. And while that's great, we need to make sure that the numbers make sense. We also need to make sure that there's an underlying agreement across both organizations that you're trying to bring together. And so before you even get to the LOI or letter of intent, you should be looking at the operational capability. What tech stack do they have? What are their quality standards? What does your cultural alignment look like? Are your values aligned? Is the work style aligned? What are the feedback norms that you have between both of the companies? And really, what are the relationship dynamics? Where's the client concentration? What do the compensation plans look like? How do those compensation plans compare to your compensation plans? And putting in a plan for a leadership transition. So if you are reviewing your IBP, you should be looking at this before you even have a conversation and creating this before you have a conversation. So that way, when you go into these conversations, you know where you are going to score high and where you're going to score low. And it will help you to determine if you need to spend more time, more money, or if you're going to need any help after you close. Everybody talks about cultural alignment. So in my opinion, cultural alignment is really the fuse that lights every other synergy that you have with post-close integration. So if you have a mismatch here with cultural alignment, you can expect that you're going to have a lot of issues. So values alignment. It's obviously a sanity check to make sure that your core values are aligned. What's the decision style and how are they taking care of their clients? What's the client care philosophy? And the other thing you want to look at is the employees themselves. Would you proudly put their manager in front of your top client tomorrow? And if that answer is no, then you might not be aligned from a values perspective. You need to look at their communication compatibility. So compare their communication cadences with their clients. What's the transparency that they have with their clients? How are they resolving conflict? And you should be flagging any gaps in the communication before day one of your acquisition. So that way you can be prepared with templates and communication plans and so forth to make sure that from a cultural perspective, not only from with the clients, but also the employees that you guys match. And then the third aspect of culture is really your partnership trust indicators. So, depending on how you manage your acquisition and how you set it up, some owners they leave right away. Some owners don't leave right away. So you want to make sure that there's a mutual respect and a shared vision. If they're going to be staying, that they complement your strengths and also that they shared that vision. So, you want to just make sure that everything here from a cultural perspective is aligned. And if there's anything that's coming up as a red flag for you, that you need to address that and ensure that you can have a plan in place where you can adjust and assess your culture to make sure that everything is in alignment post close. I like to think of due diligence as really your integration playbook that you're writing in real time. So, we talk about, like I said, going through the financials, making sure that everything looks good there. The other areas that you need to adjust and look at and evaluate is the technology and the systems. So, as you know, as accounting firms, we use a lot of different technology. So, you want to document who has admin access to all of these software programs. Is it cloud versus legacy? How is the data flowing between all the different systems? And do you guys own rights to everything that you need rights to? From a financial operations perspective, vendor and client payments are very, very important. Obviously, you don't want to miss any vendor payments. You also don't want to have any client payments that don't come through. You need to look at whether it's recurring billing, what the reconciliations look like, and also come up with a plan for how to manage reconciliations post close. A lot of people don't think about that. What does that look like post close? You sign the paperwork and one day everything is belonging to one company and the next day it belongs to another company. So you just have to make sure that there's a plan in place for reconciliation, because I guarantee you that payments are going to be moving back and forth into the wrong accounts. And a lot of people don't prepare for that and put that in their closing documents. The last part is the people and the relationships. So you need to do a comp analysis. You need to look at total compensation and ensure that you're making your employees whole when they join your new company. A lot of companies, when they talk about people and relationships in doing that comp analysis, they don't consider things like PTO or differences in healthcare. They're really just looking at the base salary. And I'm informing you that you should look at more than that. It should be a full comprehensive comp analysis for every single employee to make sure that none of your employees are losing anything through this acquisition. You also need to have really specific clarity on your roles. You might be bringing in a leadership team that doesn't necessarily fit into your current structure. And so what does that look like for them? Where do they land and where do they sit within your leadership company, within your leadership team, and or within the company in and of itself? And then you should also be mapping who owns which client relationships. This is really, really important. And all of this information that you're collecting during due diligence is going to roll into your draft 100-day checklist that you can execute the moment the ink dries on your purchase agreement. So most people in our profession, as you know, didn't choose to become accountants because they love constant change. Accountants really value consistency, and surprises create a lot of churn for them. So a common buyer misconception is that everyone's going to be excited. Well, the reality is that they're really anxious, not excited. So you'll need to plan proactively and have communication that addresses fears. You're going to set expectations, and you're going to repeat those messages frequently. Oftentimes, people need to hear something 5, 6, 7 times before it actually sinks into their head that that's the true reality of what's going on. There are a lot of different theories on pre-close communication. So the traditional approach, in my opinion, treats employees like an afterthought. You surprise them on closing day, you expect them to sign an employment agreement within 24 hours, and This approach really creates unnecessary anxiety, resentment, and can potentially lead to turnover within the employees. Where on the other side of that, what I have seen is that by gaining the seller's confidence for pre-close communications, it allows for a more gradual introduction to the change. So you're going to be giving employees time to process the news, ask questions, adjust to the idea before making any commitments, and just gives them that time to really process the information rather than a, hey, here's your new employment agreement, sign this within 24 hours or you don't have a job. What you will find is that sellers can sometimes be concerned with the confidentiality, and those concerns are real. What I recommend is that if they don't feel comfortable that the deal is going to close, that you work with the seller to identify key employees or leaders that can be brought into the process earlier with appropriate NDAs. So you're talking about maybe you're the sales team leader, an operations leader, your HR lead, and so forth, because those leaders then become valuable allies and assets for you in the integration process. They're going to be the first ones that the employees that they know go to because they trust them and they know them and they have a relationship with them. And those key leaders can then help you address any concerns and help guide their colleagues really through this entire transition. So in my opinion, the key success factor is simple, but it's pretty profound that people don't like surprises about their livelihood. And I'm sure that you guys can all agree that in that statement as well. The integration team structure. So as most people know, integration is very specialized work. So I have seen that even new leaders need a lot of coaching on what to expect and what needs to take place. So don't assume that your team knows exactly how to handle this. You should be creating teams or leads that are assigned specific roles and responsibilities. So for instance, your HR people lead, they're going to be looking over and analyzing and managing culture, benefits, morale. Your ops team is going to be looking at process alignment. Your client lead is going to work on retention and client communication plans. Your IT system's going to look at your data flows, your security. You're going to have a finance team that's going to be going over your billing and your vendors. And the recommendation is that you assign a single integration lead with authority to unblock decisions. You don't want to have any roadblocks during the post-close integration process. Decisions tend to be made really fast and need to be made really quickly. And the reason why is because you don't want anything spiraling and getting out of control if you're sitting and waiting to make a decision. Day one is going to set the tone for everything. So here are your non-negotiables from day one. Your payroll and system access, you should have zero issues. So making sure that you get all the employees set up on your payroll systems without any hiccups. You should have documented SOPs for this. And also that they can access whatever it is that they need. We don't want to put any roadblocks in front of the employees to be able to service their clients. You also should have meetings and be connected personally with both the seller in meetings with your top 20% clients. So they should be contacted typically within 24 hours post-close. And I recommend for all the other clients, you can host a both team town hall or you could host a client town hall just to discuss, what changes today and what's going to stay the same. You want to make sure that you reiterate with both the team and the clients that you're not here to come in and shake up the bag and make everything better, right? You're here to help stabilize, create efficiencies within the company, and to really take everybody to the next level and to inform your employees that this is a growth opportunity for them and get them to see the value in that. You should always have orientation packets ready. So all of this should be established pre-close with thinking about, hey, what questions are the employees or the clients going to ask? And have an FAQ document that already has all the answers. And you should also have a communication cadence that's locked in and ready to execute from day zero, really, right? Because day zero is the day that the agreement is signed. From a technology integration reality, most acquired firms have tech stacks that overlap or lag. So you have to map out every app, every data flow during due diligence, and that's going to help you expose any gaps and redundancies. I recommend that you create a dedicated IT integration team or consult with an IT provider before closing. Most people wait to do this after closing, but this should be done before closing. they can help you to identify any challenges that might impact valuation or your deal structure. IT integration can be very costly, and so having this information pre-close will then give you that information to discuss the proper valuation. You should always stage your migrations and save your workflows. So payroll, email, security first, core operations next, client portals absolutely last. So what you want to think of this in like one small wave is going to beat one tidal wave. And so it's taking it in a very phased approach to integration. You're also going to want to review your vendor contracts and also your client contracts. For your vendor contracts specifically, you can look to renegotiate them. They may need to be merged, or you may need to terminate a vendor agreement early, and just review the auto renew clauses, because those type of agreements could potentially eat any synergy that you have that you're looking to get from post acquisition. You should also protect your revenue through trust, right? You want to make sure that you're keeping your client tools stable, that there's nothing going on that is going to create or create any anxiety or induce change or churn to your team. So the goal here is keep the employees happy, keep the clients happy, keep the clients locked in and under contract, and reduce churn at all costs. So always plan for a longer timeline than you think. It takes a minimum of 6 months for a full technology integration. Your ROI rests on your client stickiness. So for your high value clients, you want to have personal handoff calls, like I said, with the seller plus the buyer. You should be providing clear service reassurances on both fees, staff contacts, deliverable dates, being unchanged, and you should always follow up with any emails to clients within 24 hours to make sure that you're being as responsive as possible. I also recommend that you rely on your employees' relationships with their clients for warm introductions. They are the ones that have that client relationship, and it's important that you leverage that for the introductions. So this is always a tricky, sensitive subject, but what is the seller's ongoing role? As you guys heard, some sellers are out right away, some sellers stay right away. So it's really important to define up front whether the seller is an employee, a consultant, or an advisor. So you should be setting shared success metrics, client retention, revenue targets, having clear authority boundaries to avoid any second guessing the new leadership. And you can always add accountability mechanisms as a holdback provision tied to client retention and so forth that will help to keep the seller engaged and supportive throughout the integration process. There are several different ways to approach integration, and I don't think that there's a one-size-fits-all integration approach that will significantly impact your strategy. So deciding between a full roll-up or a platform approach, that really should be made during due diligence, and it should be made based on a couple key factors. So to do a full roll-up, you're basically taking the company, putting them all into one brand, one system. You're going to have the highest synergy here, but you're also going to have the highest disruption. The other approach is to do a platform integration. So you're going to keep the acquired brand. You're going to integrate only the core operations. It's much faster, but you also risk having your information in data silos. So I recommend that you decide early, you analyze and review the brand strength. You look at the system overlap, going back to our due diligence. Okay, what systems do we have? What systems do they have? What's the team appetite? And what is our culture fit that we have within both of the teams? Change management. Let's talk about that. So resistance is always normal, and you're going in and you're disrupting routines. People have fears of job security. There's client concerns. And so your toolkit is really just being transparent and communicating why. You need to identify change champions. You need to celebrate every win that comes across your desk. And you need to maintain some familiar rituals to really anchor in that culture. Any major client changes that you make should wait at least 6 months. You should focus first on all of your internal systems and processes, allow your team to adjust to those, and then introduce changes that might affect client relationships. Some common integration pitfalls. So you should watch for the assumption of excitement. So, a lot of people are not as excited about this process as you might be. You should never rush your tech transitions. If you are not certain on something, consult with some experts on what needs to be done. Having poor communication, so don't be vague in your plans, be extra detailed, communicate in 10 different ways. Mismanaging the seller expectations, I think, is another one. So it just goes back to, make sure that everything is clear from day one on what is to be expected. And I will tell you that all four of these have showed up in a failed integration that I've looked at. So make sure that, you're keeping on top of these common pitfalls. Also, you should be measuring your success. So as everybody likes to say, what gets measured gets managed, and that is very true in integration. So I recommend that you track your employee retention religiously, especially in those first 90 days, and segment by importance. So losing a key relationship manager has very different implications than losing a junior staff. As far as the technology integration timeline, day 1 through 30 is really just your critical access items. Day 31 through 90 is your core ops. Day 91 through 180 is your full integration. And this is really when you're going to be talking about anything that's client related. I recommend that you phase these disruptions of integrating systems and do this over a period of time. Don't come in super heavy right at the beginning. It should be, okay, we're going to do this. The team should know, okay, after this comes this step, and after this comes this step. So having a very clear timeline will really help the employees and the clients understand what comes next. As you are working through this acquisition and creating this checklist, your integration playbook really is a document that you're creating, but it's a competitive advantage that you're putting together for all future acquisitions. So a playbook that you're creating turns one success into many. It should include your due diligence checklist, timeline templates, pre-approved communication scripts, any data migration SOPs. So make sure as you're doing data migrations that you're creating SOPs so that process is repeatable. And I always like to say that you should have a RACI chart for pretty much every task or every leader that you have implementing any changes. As you are going through and creating your integration checklist, it should follow a pretty logical progression. So you're going to look at your pre-close preparation sets that are your pre-close preparation, and that really is going to set the foundation for success. And then you follow that with your critical operational continuity and then executing any core integration. So the most important takeaway is that integration success really comes from systematic planning, clear communication, and the flexibility to adapt when the reality doesn't match your initial timeline. You should always remember that planning during due diligence, you should put your people first, you should communicate proactively, you should move deliberately, and you should measure and adjust. And if I could leave you with one of the most important lessons that I've learned through the four integrations, is that you should invest in much time in that as you do in the buying process into the integration process. And if you remember nothing else, that is the most important thing. Don't rush this. Don't try and make any quick moves. Like, think very deliberately and be thinking 10 steps ahead of every decision that both your clients and your employees are going to make. Thank you for joining me today. I'm happy to dig deeper into this offline, and I'd love to open it up for questions.
Yeah, I think we have time for one question. There was a note on you mentioned the RACI chart for tasks. Can you unpack what that is for folks maybe not familiar with that?
Yeah, so a RACI chart is basically going to provide you with a very clear template of who's responsible, who's accountable, who should be consulted, and who, I forget the I, goodness, of course I'm going to say this now, but there's four aspects of it.
Informed?
Informed, there you go, thank you. Yeah, so every decision and every person that you have on your integration team should know, okay, do I have the authority to make this decision? And if I make this decision, who do I need to inform about this decision? And that's really, really important as you're moving quickly through this integration, is giving people the authority and the power to make decisions.
Fantastic. Ashley, this was a great talk. As you were going through it, I was like, oh, well, I wonder what the retention benchmark is, or I wonder about this. And then it was always in the next slide or the slide thereafter. I would highly encourage folks to reach out to Ashley if you do have questions. If you have a takeaway, share it on social. Be sure to tag both of us. Ashley, thank you for the time. This has been great. Folks, we're going into our final panel. It's a great transition panel because it's called the I Buy Firms panel. So you're kind of getting peanut butter and chocolate here, right? So we're going to be talking about what it looks like to buy. We're just coming out of the one we were talking about integration. So for folks, if you don't have the link, sometimes I get questions about that. I'll throw that in the chat. Ashley, this has been great. Thanks again for coming on.
Yeah, no problem. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.